Well, the holidays continue. Hopefully, you've all had some time with family and friends. Good times remembering. We have enjoyed good times with our family. Three of our daughters are here this morning, so that's pretty special for us. We were reminiscing a bit. Several years ago, after the three oldest daughters had left home for college and beyond, our youngest of four, Dana, became an only child. And we told her that after years of four of a kind and a full house, and all of the activities and the friends that go with that she was lucky enough to be now the sole recipient of all of our love and attention and affection. Well, even though we miss the older girls, this was a very special time together. Every Thursday evening at 10 p.m., Dana and I had a date night, mom and daughter, watching the TV show ER. I don't know if any of you remember that show. But together we would enter into that medical drama that chronicled life and death in a Chicago hospital emergency room. Each episode told the tale of another day, from the exciting to the mundane, from the joyous to the heartrending. And of course, the most intriguing thing were the doctors and the nurses, their lives, their loves, and losses, and we really had a lot of fun with it. Well, as in all things, it came to an end, and Dana left home and went to Juniata College. And so it wasn't quite as much fun for me to watch TV by myself, but I did, however, watch the final episode of one of our favorite docs on the show. On his deathbed, his character was searching for wisdom, for advice that he thought every father should pass along to a young daughter. And this is what he said. He said, "Be generous with your time, your love, and your life." As you can imagine, it was high drama. It really was primetime TV after all. But it stayed with me all those years. Be generous. Well, in order to give a more complete understanding of the scope of the word generous, Merriam-Webster has provided us with this. Be liberal, lavish, magnanimous, munificent, giving, open-handed, free-handed, bountiful, unselfish, ungrudging, indulgent, prodigal, kind, benevolent, altruistic, charitable, noble, big-hearted, honorable, larger or more plentiful than usual or necessary, copious, ample, abundant, profuse, bumper, opulent, prolific. To be generous is so much more than just opening our purse strings. To be generous is to open our lives and who we are to one another. Hear these words from the Gospel according to Matthew as paraphrased by Eugene Peterson in The Message. They've opened to me an additional insight into familiar teaching of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. Let me tell you why you are here. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colors in the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this, as public as a city on a hill. If I make you light bearers, you don't think I'm going to hide you under a bucket, do you? I'm putting you on a light stand. Now that I've put you there on a hilltop, on a light stand, shine. Keep open house. Be generous with your lives. By opening up to others, you'll prompt people to open up with God, this generous mother and father in heaven. These are the instructions of Jesus. Be generous with your lives. A few weeks ago, I shared with you an inspirational book that I'm reading. It's co-authored by two men, both Nobel Peace Prize laureates, who know great suffering and great pain. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, is a spiritual leader of the Tibetan people, although he's been forced to live in India as a refugee for 56 years. Archbishop Desmond Tutu lives in Cape Town, South Africa, and was pivotal in the struggle to eradicate apartheid. He has worked for peace and human rights as a global activist and spent time in prison for his efforts of nonviolent resistance. The Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu recently spent a week together in the creation of the Book of Joy. Here's a clip that gives us a bit of insight to their week together.
you don't wake up in the morning and say, hey, I'm going to become a friend to the Dalai Lama. It just happens. You see, he's not listening.
I will not listen.
Behave like a holy man.
How are you doing, everyone? Are we ready?
People innately are good, you know.
All have same sort of desire to have happy life, happy day, happy month.
When we kept quiet, our hearts discovered that they were kindred.
Our religion is something unique and something very special.
In their book, these mischievous, holy men concur that generosity is at the center of humanity. It's what makes our lives joyful. It's what makes our lives meaningful. They have said that if you want others to be happy, practice generosity. If you want to be happy, practice generosity. It is deeply rooted in us, they say. It is in being generous that we see our connection to all of humanity. That African concept of Ubuntu, I am me because of you. And the Dalai Lama has added, taking care of others, helping others, being generous, ultimately is the way to discover your own joy and to have a happy life, even in the midst of disappointment and perhaps suffering. Unmistakable as we see these two men together. Being generous makes us feel better about ourselves. It's a natural confidence builder. By focusing on what we are giving rather than what we are receiving, it shifts our gaze away from ourselves and creates a more outward orientation toward the world. While maintaining a healthy level of self-awareness and sensitivity to self is really important, too often we narrow in on ourselves with a negative lens and spend wasted time listening to the critical inner voice in our heads. Being generous distracts us from that voice and that inward focus. When we see someone else benefiting from our actions, for instance, it's difficult for that inner voice to argue that we are anything less than God's beloved. The Archbishop Tutu points out repeatedly that when we are generous, we are easier to be with and fun. We radiate happiness, and our very company can bring joy to others, he says. And who can begin to even imagine the ripple effects of that joy? Year after year, more and more studies are highlighting the benefits of generosity, not just on mental health, but also on physical well-being. Not only does generosity reduce stress, it is also shown to increase one's lifespan and even help to prevent the development of Alzheimer's disease. To be generous is so powerful that according to recent research, just thinking about being generous increases the protective antibody salivary immunoglobulin A, a protein used by our immune system. We are healthier when we're generous. Generosity is truly the gift that keeps on giving in many ways. There's probably no better way to be inspired than to hear stories about being generous. Harman Singh, a 22-year-old student in New Zealand, was at home when he heard car wheels screeching, a commotion, and then ran outside to investigate. He said he saw a child down on the ground and a woman was holding him. His head was bleeding, he said, so I unveiled my turban and put it under his head. Members of the Indian community praised Harman for his action, considered a hugely significant act of humanity by breaking strict religious protocol to help a stranger. not to mention removing the turban, leaving his head uncovered. I wasn't thinking about the turban. I was thinking about the accident, and I just thought, he needs something on his head because he's bleeding. And I think, he said, anyone else would have done the same. Several weeks ago, I took part in a group Skype with other Church of the Brethren clergywomen from around the world. It was so good to see some very dear and familiar faces on screen and to learn to know some new women as well. It was a time for us to process the hurt and the hope that we were feeling for the church and for the world. Tara Hornbacher, Bethany Seminary professor and leader in the church, followed the call with an email to all participants, referencing what we are experiencing in our culture and the conflict in our denomination. She said, "We may not have been ready." And then she continued, "But everything in our lives has prepared us for such a time as this. We are a generous people, as Greg listed, and the list goes on. A significant year-end offering to enhance our ministries that maybe wouldn't be possible otherwise. A beautiful new nursery, easily accessible to parents to offer hospitality and loving care to its youngest members, and furnished by you all. Yard signs welcoming all neighbors. Love and support notes, a card shower to soften the blow of hate mail in a local community. Hours of commitment to make possible the resettlement of our neighbors from afar. Continued support and care for our sisters and brothers in the EYN. Weekly trips to help with a food bank in the city and even right here in our own town. Be generous with your lives, Matthew's gospel tells us. The church we love is more lovely than ever before in such days as these. More lovely and more needed than ever before. We have been prepared to be generous for such a time as this, and we must continue to live into that call to be generous, hospitable and open, and even more clear about our welcome, our vision, and our hope for the world. We're here to be light, bringing out the God colors in the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this, as public as a city on the hill. If God makes us light bearers, we aren't going to hide under a bucket. God is putting us under a light stand, is putting us on a light stand, and we're going to shine for that light for all to see. We will keep open house and be generous with our very lives. Our generous parent in heaven has prepared a table for us, a table around which we all can gather when we can all remember and when we are nourished.